Well, hello, Endow ladies. Simone here, Director of Program Growth. And I'm back with Annette Bergeon, our Executive Director. Welcome, Annette.
Oh, so always awesome to be here.
Yes, I always love our podcasts together. They're among my favorites. And today we're going to briefly talk about what do we do now that Lent is over and the St. Teresa Lent podcast study series is over. And for all those who listened, thank you for joining us, whether you did it in a self-study and listen to the podcast. And I know many of you were emailing me that you organized yourselves into little Lenten groups where you would read and listen and then get together with your endowed groups and talk about it. So thank you so much for joining us, and so grateful for the Avila Institute as well for collaborating with us on that project. So my idea for the Lent series, and that's probably sick of hearing this, but for all of you who don't know, my idea for the Lent series was, our Lent study our study on St. Teresa of Avila is very robust. And I just wanted to get St. Teresa of Avila out there, and Lent is the perfect time to do it because she's the doctor of church on prayer. So it's kind of like an appetizer to doing an actual Endow study on St. Teresa of Avila. So Annette, what do you think that women who've now done this Lent podcast study series should do now?
Oh, okay, wonderful. Well, thank you for that question, because I do have a lot of thoughts on it. And first of all, let me say that you and Christine and Stephanie did an amazing job on the podcast. I know Teresa of Avila's writings very well. I've read a lot of her books, and I've read the Endow Study Guide on Teresa of Avila. And you guys did an amazing job really trying to condense, what is the essence of her message. But Teresa of Avila, she has so much knowledge, wisdom, experience, and her writings are so amazing that it's impossible in 7 weeks of 30-minute podcasts to really do more than just scratch the surface. I
Mhm.
mean, the Endow Study Guide is 200 pages long. It's one of our thickest study guides, and the study guide itself is a condensation or a summarization of all of her writings. So there's so much wealth and there's so much richness that like I said, you can really only barely scratch the surface. So, and the other thing that I thought was interesting listening on the podcast is there's so many times when I wanted to interrupt you and say, well, wait a minute, I have something I want to say, or you didn't answer this question, or there was a question in the text that I thought was really compelling and it didn't get answered. So I wanted to say, wait a minute, can we go back and talk about that question? So for me, what I would really encourage women to do is to, now that they've had this beautiful introduction to St. Teresa of Avila, to gather together with their small groups, or to, let us help you find a small group of women to really dive into the study, to read it again, and to sit with your Endow group members and answer the questions, talk about the questions. Because what I find very often is that, not all of us have had all of these experiences, but very often there's someone in the group that can relate in a really personal way to one particular aspect of what St. Teresa of Avila is saying, or someone has an insight into something that she's writing about, maybe a paragraph that you just read right over, it didn't really speak to you. To someone else, it was a showstopper. And when they share that with the group, that becomes a showstopper for everyone. So you can really learn from each other and go even deeper than you could possibly imagine into all of her writings and all of her teachings, and make it a permanent part of your heart.
I love that. I love your relationship with St. Teresa of Avila, because right from the beginning when we met, Annette, you were, we just knew that was like one of the first things that we learned about you, that you love her so much. So I hope that she's hearing you right now and she's seeing your heart and my heart too. And that the women listening who've done this Lent series are going to take up the call to spiritual motherhood and say, you know what, I want to go deeper into St. Teresa, and I want to bring some other women with me. And I really appreciated that Stephanie Burke said, look, the Endow Study Guide, and Christine too, does such a great job of just an introduction and a deep introduction to Teresa of Avila's Interior Castle, because like many of us, we've picked up Interior Castle. This has certainly happened to me. And I'm like, I don't know about this, maybe another day, maybe later on. But the Endow Study Guide for me was such a great introduction. And I had that experience, or what you're encouraging women to do. I felt that as I was preparing for the Lent series, as I was reading the chapters and preparing for the podcast recordings, I was thinking, oh man, like I feel brimming in my heart a desire to not just get the information, right? Sometimes we think, well, I've read it, so I've got the information. But like you noted, education really happens when the information becomes formation, and that happens slowly and over time, and through, like what you've often said, Annette, the collective wisdom that you can receive from an Endow group and that whole experience. So I thought, okay, when this is over, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start an Endow group on this, and I'm going to maybe take the whole year, because it's a long study. You could do it in 20 weeks, you could do it. Maybe it doesn't have to take that long, but I had that desire to really like you just nurse a glass of wine, just to really go deeply. And I'm so curious to see what the ladies in my future Teresa Endow group are going to say. That's going to just, like you said, kind of be a light bulb in my head with their own spiritual experiences. So, and that maybe for those who are, I know there's many who are listening on the podcast, but for those who are watching on YouTube, I'm going to share my screen, and maybe you can walk us through kind of the logistics of what it would mean to start an Endow group.
Absolutely. So the main thing that you need to start an Endow group is really an open heart. First of all, an open heart to want to learn, a desire to learn, and an open heart to learn that in community with other women. So if you have a community of women that maybe from your parish, or maybe parents of your friends, your children's friends from school, mothers of your children's friends from school, if you have a ready-made community, that's the perfect place to start. You can always invite someone that you maybe don't even know that well. You don't have to always, Endow groups aren't always groups of women that know each other well. That becomes part of the fruit of the Endow group, because you tend to go deep very quickly. But if you have a community and a willingness and a desire to learn, it becomes very easy. You can see on this page that Simone is sharing that we've kind of broken it out into steps. And step one, you're already halfway down that, because you've decided that you'd like to study St. Teresa of Avila. So that question of where do I start, with which study do I start, that's already taken care of. If you don't have a community of women, and sometimes you're new to an area, or sometimes you don't necessarily have the relationships and connections at your parish, sadly that sometimes happens even within our Catholic Church, that you don't feel connected to other women in your parish, we can help you to find a group, because we have a sign up on our website. And if you fill out your name and address, we can run a match to see if there's other women in your area that are also interested in joining an Endow group. So we just ask for your name and your address and your zip code in your parish. And then every 2 or 3 weeks, we will run a match and look if there's other women in your area, and we'll send you an email if we found other women and connect you that way. So there's a lot of opportunities for you to find a group if you don't have a group on your own. And then from there, choose a place and a time to meet, which for some groups, daytime times work best, maybe late morning coffee or over lunch. Other groups meet in the evenings. You can meet in the group members' homes, or you could choose a location either at your parish or a coffee shop or a library. One of my Endow groups for a long time met at a public, kind of like a meeting room in a public library that you could reserve. So there's a lot of opportunities for places to meet and choose a date, and everyone purchase your study guide and come together and pour into Teresa of Avila, and let the magic of an Endow group begin.
Yeah, and I would like to say, for those who are like, well, I don't want to join a group, I want to host a group, that same form can connect you to women in your local area if, as Annette mentioned, you just don't have those connections, just check, I'm interested in hosting, so that we know, hey, we're going to connect you with these women who are looking forward to you hosting this study. And then we have our study guide page on St. Teresa of Avila that you can, additional resources. Certainly the podcast recordings will be up there, but there's other things up there, other resources under the supplements that you could check out. Also, you could do a virtual group if you don't want to meet in person. That we also have lots of virtual groups. And then, as Annette mentioned, you want to give at least 2 weeks for the ladies to sign up, because it takes, we want time for shipping and for the study guides to arrive. But just a little bit on the Endow method, because I know so many of you are new from our friends at the Avila Institute, or this is your first time encountering Endow. And many of you did this podcast series kind of reading on your own. But the study guide is actually designed to be read out loud. So there's no homework. So if you're like, well, I would love to do this and I love reading, right? And that's why I did the podcast. But if there are women that are interested in St. Teresa, but they're like, look, I can't read all this, that's okay. It's meant to be read out loud so that there's no homework. So it's not just I don't have homework, but also there is a genius to the reading aloud method, which you can check out on our website, why that's really important. And then, the goal is to cultivate the interior life. That is the most important thing you could do with your time. So that's why we were so passionate about just getting her out in any way possible to encourage that. And then we know there's just like a total additional richness that will happen in understanding what's going on in prayer, which makes St. Teresa of Avila the great and first female doctor of the church on prayer. So Annette, anything else we should mention to those who maybe hopefully we're inspiring to take up this important work on this study?
Absolutely. The main thing that I would mention is when you're reading the writings of St. Teresa of Avila, and she lived centuries ago, sometimes it's difficult to make that connection between something that she said or wrote in the 16th century to my life today, about the way I'm living in this time, the struggles I have with prayer, the struggles we have with our culture, with living our faith in our culture. All of those things, sometimes it's difficult to make those connections. And what I find in the discussion groups, when women come together and you pour over these questions and everyone shares what's on their hearts, those connections are made, and those conversations help make what St. Teresa of Avila was writing and experiencing in the 16th century, they make them relevant to your life today. And I always remember when I left an Endow group, I always left feeling richer, like I'd been given a gift on how to live my life better, or how to parent better, or how to pray better. I always felt richer when I left than when I joined. And that's something I would love all of our listeners to experience.
Yeah, I just love that. And on a final note, for those of you who are like, well, I'm not holy enough, and I can't even, like you said, I can't even relate to the sixth mansion. What is that? She's a doctor of the church. What that means is, as being a doctor of the church, is that the church is highlighting her. There's only 7 doctors of the church, and the church, out of, bajillion saints, they're saying, pay attention to this woman, because she is of universal value to the church, and the holiness and the heights of holiness and prayer and meditative and contemplative prayer that she's reached, that's a gift that God wants to give to everyone. So you are worthy, and we are excited for you to begin this path. Thank you so much, Annette.
Thank you too, Simone. It's always a pleasure.
And keep us posted, ladies.